Top 5 most interesting spring football stories. We're heading into the next couple weeks where we've got actual spring games coming up. I think there's 9 this weekend, and there's a whole bunch more next weekend, but 9 like
there's already been some,
Yeah, there have been some, but there's like 9 big ones this weekend, and then next week there'll be some more. So thought we'd do a football story today since we've done all basketball and a little bit of golf, and we had 40 minutes of nothingness. Into the void.
Part of the eclipse.
Yeah, exactly. It just, we wanted everybody to experience what it's like to be, in outer space apart from everybody, I guess, because that's what it was to us. But top 5 most interesting spring football stories. Number 5, how do new conferences change teams' outlooks? So, I don't think for the SEC, for Texas and the SEC, it really changes theirs that much because they're rolling along, although, it will be maybe a little bit tougher week in and week out than it was last year. I don't think they have the toughest schedule, and the SEC, obviously. And then Big 12, you've got some teams coming in that obviously, like Utah, could win the conference year one with the quarterback they have coming back. And then in the ACC, I don't really know what it does for those teams because SMU is the best one of the 3 coming in, but again, they haven't played a schedule like that yet. So it should be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But I do think, how you adjust to that, how you adjust to the conferences, that's all taking place right now.
We ought to do a segment when Craig and I are going to be out for a couple of days because of Jennifer and Daniel's wedding. But
it's very selfish of her.
Okay. I know. And a segment on the new schools who are moving into other conferences, top 20, whatever it would be, on who will be better among all of them. And, of course, there's some blue bloods in that mix and also some up-and-coming teams, too. Craig, anything on what he was mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, there's schools from all types of different situations because there's like a dozen of them that are all moving to new conferences. So, yeah, there's some blue bloods. There's some did they even cares like Cal and so on. But I'm just glad to be at this point. I mean, after watching that football season where everybody's just talking about where they're going to be next year, that got really old. I don't like that. It's part of why I don't want to talk realignment all the time because I don't want to talk about always like what's going to happen or what might happen as opposed to what's actually happening. And so that's fun at times, but I am glad this year that we can just say, all right, Oklahoma and Texas are in the SEC now. No more like they don't want to be here and, being and moaning about this and that. Same thing with, the Pac, like that's done now, not glad that that's officially over. Glad that some people got proven wrong, but glad that we at least have some finality on that, and we kind of know, all right, Oregon and Washington and, off to the Big Ten, and we know what's what, and that's kind of nice because for so many months and even for a couple of years now, there's been so many plates in the air about teams that were either officially moving or might be moving, and so, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see just and realize, like, oh, is that a Big Ten patch on Washington's jersey? And Ohio State's a conference game? And, like, that's all just going to be wild to wrap our heads around. So, yeah, it's definitely going to change some outlooks. And I look at my own favorite in Oklahoma of, like, do I need to, starting this year, kind of change my expectations about what's a good season or what the I guess, year in and year out is going to look like versus what it's been in the Big 12 for so long, which is pretty much – for the most part, 10-2, 10 and something or 11 and something. That might not be the case, in the SEC to start off with. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
Number 4, Ole Miss and their NIL All-Stars. And I say this, or I guess I should say transfer portal All-Stars, whatever you want to say, but I'm more intrigued by Ole Miss than any team in the country right now because they are really, really going for it. And how this can mesh in in year one. And look, they've got Jackson Dart and they've got Walker Howard behind him. So they're ready to go, to keep this transition going. But Walter Nolan coming in, all the guys they have all that guys have the way. That's why I said they were number 1 yesterday for Damian Martinez. It just seems like that's a fit because they have a need and they are clearly willing to spend and they're trying to make things happen. But Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin this spring, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got up his sleeve. This is kind of a seminal moment for him. Where is this? Can you get out of being a good coach and start being, maybe on your way to being a great coach? We'll see, because he's good, but he hasn't done anything great yet.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a hot dog eating contest. I think Joey Chestnut's actually supposed to be there for the Ole Miss spring game, and whatever else they got going on. That was certainly a fun, kind of twist to the normal just spring game setting, and I don't know what else they got in store for that, but he said that it's kind of be like a skills competition, and so they're trying to just change up the spring game routine, but they've obviously pushed their chips into the middle of the table. Saban's out of the way as well, so it's all there for the taking for Ole Miss to strike while the iron's hot and while there's a little bit of a void. You still have Kirby in Georgia. Now you got Sark in Texas and Venables in Oklahoma rolling in as well. So it's not going to get any easier. But if there was a little bit of an opening, they're trying to slip through that with going as hard as they did in NIL. So, yeah, Ole Miss is going to be a very interesting team from a star power standpoint, and just the moves they made, it levels up their expectations from what are normally pretty solid expectations.
Absolutely. Number 3, which QB transfers are ready to rock? I mean, is Cam Ward going to do well at Miami? Is DJU going to be the starter at FSU? There's actually a little bit of question about that right now, because Brock Glenn apparently has been playing really well in the spring. I still think it's going to be DJU, and then Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhoek will battle it out there. But there's a lot of interesting ones. Is Riley Leonard healthy enough to really look, if he's healthy, he's going to be great for Notre Dame. But how long does that ankle injury linger, and how much does that slow him down in getting acclimated to Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock's system? We'll see. So there's a lot of questions all over the country when it comes to transfer quarterbacks. I'm going to hold off on Ohio State for a second because that's coming up in 2. But there's so many transfer quarterbacks all over the place. Look, is DeQuan Finn ready to go here at Baylor?
Yep.
Like, there's
Is KJ Jefferson
KJ
going to
Jefferson
do
at UCF? Yeah.
I mean, is he going to do big things in Orlando? I mean, it's half the country's got a transfer quarterback, so it's a talking point for sure. And yeah, which ones thrive and which ones were bad investments, basically, is how you're going to be able to look at this, because a lot of them are getting paid good money to be the next big thing. But yeah, Cam Ward in Miami, that's going to be a heck of a lot of fun if he can duplicate what he was able to do in Pullman the last couple of years. So yeah, I don't love everybody's on their third school. I don't love just the lack of rules all the time, but I do think the transfer portal, if it's done anything besides just provide opportunities that athletes deserve, it is very interesting how it shakes up the quarterback market and how that can reset expectations all over the country. So yeah, that part of it's been really entertaining from a fan standpoint to watch all the quarterback dominoes.
Number 2, Dion, year 2. There's a lot been made about, maybe him not. Ari Wasserman wrote a column about him not maybe using all that recruiting. We talked about
Dylan Gabriel at Oregon's another one.
Dylan Gabriel at Oregon. There we go. Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a lot. Malachi Nelson at Boise State.
Yeah.
But Dion year 2, I think, is a big story, and see how his roster is still mostly transfers, and he has not, gone head first into high school recruiting, and has said he's going to kind of do it a different way because he's Deion Sanders, and it's got to be different for him. But we'll see. I mean, that if they're coming into a new conference, that it's essentially a fresh start for everybody. So we'll see. He's got one of the best quarterbacks in the country on his roster, and he's got one of the best all-around players in the country on his roster, and a couple other guys that are really, really Alton McCaskill's there. They've got what's the running back that they had last year that
came from Houston. Oh, you mentioned him.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one they recruited, that freshman that had such a good year out of the backfield. But are they better enough up front to where teams don't maul them? So
the hype train that led to all of that, the opening game that they won, was insane, and it was fun to watch. And then, of course, the wheels came off as the schedule changed quite a bit.
TCU wasn't that good.
Yeah,
coming off a national championship
Neither was
appearance.
Nebraska. The Colorado State game, of course, was a game in which they won that could have been a loss. But it will be fun to see if the hype will be as much or even close to what it was when they had their great start last year, before it started, during that, and then, of course, as we said, poof, the wheels came off.
Paul, you think of Dylan Edwards?
Yeah, Dylan Edwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exciting to see them in the Big 12 again. I don't know how much that's really going to be a thing throughout the year of like welcome in the new schools and all that. I know in the SEC it's going to be a big deal. I'm sure in the Big 10 they'll make it a big deal. I think it'll be a big deal in the Big 12 to some extent. But he obviously comes in very controversial. People love him or love to hate him, and there's not really a whole lot of in-between, although I do kind of find myself in that in-between. I'm not swayed by his popularity and his star power and all of that. I kind of see through a lot of that stuff, and then on the other side, I don't despise the guy like so many people seem to, but he's an interesting figure, and he's got a couple of big-time stars that are leading the way, but if they can't block up front, it's not going to matter all that much as we saw last year. If they can't play defense, it's not going to matter that much like we saw last year, but they definitely make things more interesting. But as we also saw last year, they make things interesting until they're totally ruled out of the picture and then people don't care anymore. And that's what happened last year. So early on, if they can catch fire, it could be one of the biggest stories in college football like it was a year ago. But they've got to win. Bottom line, they've got to win or nobody's safe, including Deion Sanders.
Number 1, Ohio State quarterback battle. It is not as cut and dry as just Will Howard and Devin Brown looking good. Apparently, and this should be a shock to no one, Julian Sayin, the number 1 quarterback in the country, is playing out really well and it might push for some reps. He's just a really good player. Ryan Day's roped him in. Ohio State and Ole Miss this year playing in the playoff with the amount of transfers they were able to run in and the beneficiaries, I think, the most of the coaching upheaval this cycle were those two. But, yeah, Ohio State's got a 3-person quarterback battle right now, and I think Will Howard probably winds up with it, but maybe things weren't as dire at that position as people may have thought with Devin Brown and coming back, because apparently he's made some strides.
Well, how about this? Will Howard got beat out at his old school. So it's not like he's not a guy that's just an automatic. And so, yeah, I mean, he got beat out by a freshman in Avery Johnson a year ago. So he's capable of getting knocked off that perch, and I never looked at him as like, oh, yeah, he's the surefire starter in Columbus, and nobody's going to beat him. So, yeah, I'd imagine that Julian Sayin is giving him a run for his money and, the rest of that room. So, yeah, that's going to be very interesting. And, boy, I mean, you better hope in the end that it's him, although you'd love it if, the freshman's just that good right away. But investment-wise, I'm sure Ohio State's, not worried too much about one investment not going right. They've got a lot of firepower money-wise, but still, I mean, you did put a big deposit down on Will Howard to be the guy, and so I'm not surprised, but that is interesting that he's getting a little bit of a run for his money.
A couple other quarterbacks we didn't bring up, only because it'll be interesting to see what Blake Shapen does at Ole Miss. And then Dylan Gabriel is still around Mississippi State, I'm sorry, with Jeff Lebby, and Dylan Gabriel at Oregon. And yet again, another year for him.
Yeah, I brought him up.
Oh, you did? Okay, good. I wanted somebody in the chat asked if we did. All right, Paul, thank you very much. Emory Winter